everyone. This is the first batch of the autumn season. This is a batch of Wushu. The tea is not sprouting that much these days. It's quite a big batch because I only got one wok, so we'll see how it goes. And this is also the first batch since Jingmai was officially admitted to the UNESCO World Heritage. So Jingmai is now an official World Heritage Site. And what's the feeling about this? I think nowadays people have turned numb actually to that World Heritage application, because it took about 10 years. If you check on the UNESCO website, it was listed on the tentative list in 2013. So this is the end of a 10-year-long process. And it sounds like a long time, but actually I checked how many tentative sites they have in China, and they have 60. And you must know that the UNESCO only allows one application per country per year. So if you consider there are 60 sites on the tentative list, waiting for 10 years is not that bad actually. The problem is, I think, every year the government kind of over-promised and under-delivered. So like for the past 5 years, we've heard that Jingmai would would become a heritage site this year. So everybody is kind of in a wait-and-see attitude, and we try to just take everything by the day. Now, of course, we have reasons to be happy about this, because it's also for the locals the acknowledgement of the protection of these ancient tea gardens. So it's the reason for it being a UNESCO site. It's mainly because Jingmai has the world's largest ancient tea gardens, contiguous ancient tea gardens, but also for the cultural diversity on the mountain, and also how well the culture was preserved. And this is kind of this is a controversial topic really, because our vision of the tradition is quite modern. Like we imagine, we kind of fantasize about the past. And was the culture really actively protected in Jingmai? I don't think so. I think it just survived the chaos of history, and actually some things that could be seen as traditional are not that old. And there are also conflicts in the mind of people. Regarding the UNESCO application, you could say there are two main conflicts. One is that, okay, they say we have a traditional lifestyle here, but it's not really what people want, because in Jingmai, thanks to the tea being more expensive than before, well, people are embracing modernity. They like to build new houses, buy cars, and in some way, some things that were done before are not done anymore. For example, growing your own food, you can see that less and less, because people have become specialized tea producers. Back 20 years ago, they were more relying on mainly subsistence agriculture, growing everything they would eat, and just using tea as a cash crop to just buy gas and buy things they couldn't produce themselves. And I think nowadays people are turning away from this lifestyle. They prefer to mainly sell tea, make money with tea, and buy most other things they need with cash. For example, the big house, that was a big controversial topic regarding the application, because the government put a lot of effort into preserving the older houses, the so-called traditional houses made of wood and and slates. The problem is for people who could afford it, they would always choose to build a big concrete house, which for sure we can see as more ugly, but which is also seen as a sign of success, actually, in the upland villages in southern Yunnan. If you go to all the famous tea mountains in Xishuangbanna, you will see that they have all built those big, kind of ugly concrete houses. And there was kind of a pure problem, because in a way the government would tell you that you need to preserve the traditional lifestyle, and it would just conflict with the people's desire to keep up with the Jones when you have all your neighbors building those big houses, and that it's seen as a sign of success. You're kind of reluctant at keeping your old house. There was a construction boom that happened around 2014, right around the time of the application, actually, because at that time the value of the ancient tea gardens was recognized by the banks. So if you had a lot of tea gardens, of ancient tea gardens, you could quite easily get a big loan to build a new house. And that's what people wanted to do. But very quickly, the government intervened and tried to put a stop to it, but people still managed to do it. And so, especially in the villages with lots of ancient tea gardens, who could afford those new big houses, you could say they were in conflict with the government. The government's policy wouldn't allow them to accomplish their life goals. The second conflict is between tourism development and tea production, because a lot of people are tea makers. Well, all of the people on Jingmai have tea gardens, and you could say a good half of them also make tea at home. So they wanted to build those big houses to have a more modern factory with more machines. And but it's true that the tea factories in Jingmai tend to be over-equipped. There's also that keeping up with the Jones phenomena occurring, like your neighbor builds a fancy tea factory, you also want one, even if the amount you make doesn't really make sense having all those machines, but people do it anyway. So they wanted to have a bigger factory floor with more machines in the hope of producing more tea. And this would of course conflict with the idea of keeping traditional houses. Generally, people who made money by selling tea didn't care too much about the income the potential income from tourism. So what happened is that tourism was more developed towards the poorer villages of Jingmai. For example, Wangji and Nogan. These villages who don't have that many ancient tea gardens, and therefore might be more interested in increasing their income through tourism. Now, of course, there is that support from people, and you also have to consider like the local politicians. In some places, maybe they were harsher than others. Basically, in the villages with lots of tea, the politicians are kind of busy selling tea, using their official connections to sell tea, and so they care a bit less about the official policies, while in the poorer villages they will tend to align more with the higher government policies. So eventually you could say that's a good thing came out of the chaos. It means that the poorer villages are more geared towards tourism, and the villages with more natural resources, for example, with Jingmai Tadzai, the village we're in now, we have a lot of ancient tea gardens, and a lot of those old houses were destroyed because everyone has built their new house. We actually have one of these old houses now here where I'm making tea. there's only 26 left out of like 250 houses in the village. So generally you could say that the richer people or people who were doing tea business were not very supportive of this application because they are worried that it will influence the tea trade. A concrete example, if we have a lot of tourists coming to the mountain, there's not enough parking spots on Jingmai. So what they plan to do is to limit the access to Jingmai by car. But the problem is the tea boss doesn't want to ride a bus to come pick the tea. He wants to ride his big SUV and get the tea himself. So we're a bit worried as tea producers that it might impact the tea trade. The second point is we can sell tea to tourists, but the capacity for tourism in Jingmai is limited. Currently there's only about 500 people who can stay, 500 tourists who can stay every day in Jingmai, so it's really not a lot. And it's not really clear how the governments sees the tourism. I think they are a bit conflicted between mass tourism with like just random tourists coming and buying cheap stuff like we see in Dali or Lijiang or Sichuanbana, and maybe a more premium tourism which would mainly attract more wealthy people with the ability to buy our expensive tea. Because of course the tea in Jingmai is very expensive for the average Chinese. So if you're middle class and you're really into tea, you can probably afford like a cake for $100, but most people won't do that. So if you go towards mass tourism, you can expect that most people won't buy the expensive tea. Maybe that would be a way to value the cheaper teas we make, for example, during the summer. But in the grand scheme of things, Jingmai produces 1,000 tons of tea a year. So even if we attract 500 tourists a day, it won't make a big impact on the sales of the total production. So the tea producers, of course, they care more about the buyers from the tea factories or the more hardcore tea enthusiasts who will come and buy a lot of tea. Now, of course, the villages with fewer ancient tea gardens don't have this problem. They will be happy to sell their cheap tea to the tourists. So that's why, for example, Wangji nowadays can have a decent income from tea, even though their tea doesn't taste that great. Personally, for our business, I can be a bit worried, and maybe you should think about it. Do you think that the price of Jingmai tea will increase? That would be a concern, of course, for the hardcore tea drinker, because the hardcore tea drinker doesn't really care about any official UNESCO label. And there might be that hype building up around Jingmai. Just after the application, we received a lot of media attention, lots of journalists who want to do interviews. So we did that, and this big media coverage might bring Jingmai tea into the mainstream. So the name of Jingmai Mountain might be as famous now as Laobanzang or Bingdao. And will it lead to an increase in price? Well, I think in the short term it will not. Simply because there's no geographic indications currently. So it means you can easily fake the tea. And if the tea so you can expect a lot of the tea to be labeled from Jingmai, but it might not be Jingmai tea, because there's a very natural dynamic with the price. If the price gets too expensive, people will stop buying. They will go to another mountain, maybe blend a bit and imitate the taste of Jingmai. And so that will lead to a price decrease in Jingmai. And currently you could say the switching costs in the tea industry are quite low. If you're not satisfied with a particular mountain, you can easily switch suppliers. So since if there is no protection of the name, I don't think the price will increase. So I think in the short term, you don't need to worry about this. No, I've checked in the UNESCO, on the UNESCO website, there's a big document with their plans for Jingmai. And they plan to set up a system to protect a geographic indication. That would be the first geographic indication for poor tea. Now, I think the problem with these documents is they say a lot of things, but they are non-binding. Actually, UNESCO doesn't really offer any lawful protection to protect the sites. It's all up to the government of each country. So we will see how they decide to manage Jingmai. But if they try to protect Jingmai with the geographic indication, then we might see an increase in price. But we will see. Again, there's also another dynamic, is that the tea factories, they might buy Jingmai tea for blends. Now, if the tea gets too expensive, they will stop buying it for blends. And it means that a lot of the Jingmai tea will be left unsold, at least in the short term. It's not clear whether people will buy it at the new increased price. So I would say in short and medium term, I think the price of tea will not increase, especially considering the global economic slowdown in China. I think now China is entering in a new era, and we cannot really call it a developing country anymore. The economy is growing very slowly, and we can feel that with the tea sales. So in a way, if I look at the price these days, for example, the price is just the same as last year for these fresh leaves. So we'll see what happens, of course, regarding the national economy and also regarding the local economy. We just had the Chinese holiday just after the application, and the government, of course, expected a lot of people to come to the mountain, and people did come, but it was mostly local visitors, and these visitors don't generate really a lot of value. They won't really buy the expensive tea. And considering that the capacity of Jingmai is limited, I don't see it becoming a big tourist hotspot in China. If you look at the hotspots in Yunnan, that would be Dali, Lijiang, and Xishuangbanna, and maybe Shangri-La, and those places are cities, so they can, at the time, they can host like maybe 10,000 people or more. In those hotspots for mass tourism, people like to go there and just take pictures and maybe just do some common consumer stuff like buying drinks and food and hotels. They don't necessarily buy a lot of the local products, especially when they're expensive. I think the Gushu is still a fairly niche market. You need to find people who are into tea and who are willing to spend the money for that. And most of those people might not visit Jingmai, don't have time to, or if they were interested before, they probably came earlier. In practice, what does the UNESCO admission changes for tourism? I think the government, the local government especially, has high hopes because you could say Jingmai is the main tourist attraction you have in our county, here in Pu'er and in Lansang. So they kind of put all their money into Jingmai. But as I said, the space is limited. So one plan is to expand the area to the surrounding mountains and kind of have a network of hills with lots of guest houses, homestays, make everything look traditional. And then people wouldn't really come for the tea, but rather for the ethnic minority part, which of course is very exotic to people who live in the big cities. So if they choose to go with mass tourism and really have the investments to back it up, maybe that can work. If not, you could think that Jingmai could be a day trip excursion from, for example, Xishuangbanna. A lot of people go to Xishuangbanna. It's currently 3 hours away, but they are building a new highway. The government invested a lot during the application process in Jingmai. They built an airport fairly close to Jingmai, only like 1 hour away. They built a highway that connects Pu'er to Lansang. So it used to take 6 hours from Pu'er to come here, and now it only takes 3 hours. And now they are trying to connect through highway Lansang to Monghai, so that way we could just go down the mountain there, 20 kilometers, and they take the highway to Monghai and Xishuangbanna. That would be very useful. So we hear about the economic slowdown and the potential collapse of the economy in China, but at the local level, at least in Yunnan, you can see that these projects are still being carried out. Now, of course, Jingmai, like Yunnan is the more remote parts of China, and there is still potential for development. And now that the economy is not so good in the rest of China, maybe more investors might look into this here. So I think Jingmai still has potential to develop, but the problem with the government, the heavy government control, is that people have become a bit apathetic, a bit numb to all that development. And yet I think the private market can really correct a lot of the government mistakes, you know, like, for example, in terms of tourism, the tourist experience in Jingmai, they've done a lot on the infrastructures. So you have a place to stay, you have restaurants and things, but it really lacks a compelling story. They haven't done much work on building museums. They have some museums, but they are very boring. And I think what we lack here mainly is like tour guides or some special experiences that we could offer to small groups of people. They kind of developed that small place imitating a business model that would fit for like Lijiang or Tali, where you just have a city and people do their own things. I think the experience for Jingmai needs to be a bit more premium and try to attract people who are genuinely interested in tea. Because the mountain clearly has a lot to offer in terms of knowledge and like the feel of traveling when you go to the tea gardens. They are truly unique. The landscape of the ancient tea gardens in Jingmai is truly unique, and yet currently the tourists who don't have a guide, they are kind of constrained to a main road from which you don't really totally appreciate all the value of those gardens. So I hope in the future we can improve the service part of the tourist experience. And I think due to the hard government control, people here have an opportunistic mindset. You cannot go against the government's will, but you can maybe go around it. So sometimes they come and you have to listen to them, and when they are gone, then you are very free. So typically the government will come, for example, tell you you can only build a traditional house with like 200 square meters, and when they are gone, they will just build a big concrete building with 500 square meters. Then the government comes back, the building is already standing, and they can't do much about it. So maybe they will tell you to take down 1 floor of the building, so you only get 400 square meters, but in the end you got your building built. So there's a lot of the fait accompli strategy, you could say, in dealing with the government. At least that's what happened in Jingmai Tadzai, and the government always said like, you're the village who listens to the least, and it's mainly because people drive their income from tea. But interestingly, this year tea is not selling so well due to the economic downturn, and now you can feel some people in Jingmai in Jingmai main village kind of regret not having built on the tourism. But we'll see what happens. I think we have a good resource here, and anyway, I think the tea business will always outvalue the tourism here. Regarding our projects, I would like to host some travel groups in the future. Actually, it's not because of the UNESCO application. I had this project already just before COVID came, and then I even shot a video about it, but then COVID came, so I never got to send it. But I want to design an experience here to have people come from all over the world and enjoy tea and try to understand better what's hidden in Jingmai. Every place has a lot of hidden treasures, and it takes some time to kind of dig through it and uncover those treasures. Now, fortunately, we've been here for quite some time, and so we can make the process a bit faster. But overall, having Jingmai listed as a UNESCO site nowadays, it won't change drastically what the mountain looks like. I don't think there will be a rush of tourists to Jingmai. I think it will remain kind of secondary tourist destination in Yunnan. So in Yunnan, what other heritage sites do you have? The most famous one is Lijiang. This one attracts the most tourists, I think, in Yunnan. But then you have like the Yuanyang terraces, those rice paddies carved on the side of the mountains. You have Chenjiang, which is a fossil site near Kunming. You have the 3 parallel rivers in the northwest. And these sites are, secondary tourist hotspots. They attract some tourists, but not that much. Most people who travel to Yunnan will go to Lijiang, Dali, and Xishuangbanna. So what really changes was actually the application process, the fact that they developed the infrastructures to make Jingmai easier to access. I think it's a good thing, and that's what currently attracts some tourists. The fact they managed to kind of preserve, or you could say rebuild, because actually those traditional villages were all rebuilt around 2015, so that it gives you an impression of authenticity, but it's not actually the real old houses that they had. Well, the fact that they kept those villages kind of authentic, it attracts those people who want that exoticism from the ethnic minorities. But most of those people are not really interested in tea. I would say most people who are into tea don't really care that much. We like to go to all the famous tea mountains, and the landscapes are beautiful, but generally the houses are kind of very, very fancy, because that's what people like. And maybe actually that's the true authentic house. That's the house that corresponds to people's current aspirations, and people want to have a big house with marble and everything. So I think Jingmai will not become a big tourist hotspot like Xishuangbanna, for example, but if we can attract people who are interested in tea, or all those people who have maybe the cultural background that would make them likely to enjoy tea, then it's great. Jingmai, with its status as the only tea UNESCO site in Western China, has this advantage. It should be the ambassador of the poor tea culture. And now again, there's also another kind of conflict between tradition and modernity, because the current poor tea culture is quite modern. The way we brew tea using like the Chaozhou Gong Fu style, it doesn't come from Yunnan. People didn't brew tea like that before. And there's also that discussion sometimes, how should we brew tea? Should we brew it like roasted on the fire like in the past, or should we just embrace the current poor tea culture? Usually if you have good material, you prefer to brew it Gong Fu style. But some tourists might prefer the experience of having that traditional brewing. We can do both, of course. I hope the tourism will be a way to convert more people to tea drinking, because I think in Jingmai our ultimate goal is to sell tea and not really make money from people just visiting. And as for our products, we will make sure we don't change things and that we keep the price stable. I think now, thanks to the economic downturn in China, the increase of price in pu'er tea will probably come to a stop, or maybe just increase along with inflation. I think that the teas are at the right price point now. I don't think the high quality material will, the price will collapse. I don't think that. I think it will just remain stable. I don't see another decade of increasing by 10% every year. Because you can see that in the past decade, the price has increased so much that, for example, the HT, the 10-year-old tea, is usually at the same price as the tea from this year. And yet the young tea still sells well, because a lot of people actually like to drink young tea. Yeah, so that's about it for today. I might share more thoughts in the future. I will just keep cooking a bit on the wok, because now my temperature is quite low, but it's fine. I feel it's pretty good material. So this is our first harvest in autumn. First batch, we'll see what it gives in the wok. So thank you for watching, and I hope you'll have the opportunity to come to Jingmai. And I would say don't worry too much about that UNESCO application. There's been a lot, at least on the social media, there's been a lot of hype building up, but I think in the medium term we'll still stay focused on making tea in Jingmai. People come for the taste of tea, mainly to buy tea, and on the side for the landscapes. I hope you'll have the opportunity to come. So thank you for watching, and see you later. Bye bye.